Okay, welcome to our ITERS training. It's 4 o'clock. We're going to go ahead and get started. I'm Jackie Scott. I just want to do a quick announcement that this training is recorded, so it will be available after this real-time experience to be viewed. And if you would like to earn a professional development certificate, you can. If you take the 5-point quiz that will be available after this training is over, you just need to email me at hub@first5shasta.org, hub@first5shasta.org, and I can send you a professional development certificate after you've completed the quiz. So with that said, we're going to go ahead and get started. I'm going to turn it over to our trainer, Leslie Segura. And one more quick note, we are going to have all online participants muted until the very end. I will unmute you, and we'll have some time for questions. So make sure you're writing down all of your questions along the way, and there'll be some time at the end of the training to ask those questions. So go for it, Leslie.
Okay. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for coming today to the ITERS Trainer for Beginners. This is kind of giving you an opportunity or an introduction to the tool in itself, some of the activities that you can provide and materials, and then also a component for language. My name is Leslie Segura, and I am currently a mentor coach with Quality Counts North State, and I'm also an employee with Shasta County Office of Ed. I've been a mentor coach. This is my 4th year, and I've been an anchor for this tool, which means I'm a trainer for this tool, and I'm also an assessor for this tool, for the ITERS tool, for about a year now. So this is my first training on ITERS, so I'm very excited that you're here today. And I encourage you, really, if you do have any questions throughout, please write them down and ask them at the end, because even if I do not know the answer, I will look into finding it for you. So I am excited that you're here. I wanted to kind of start it off by having introductions. So I kind of like to, I know some people that are here, but kind of know your name and your experience with the ITERS tool.
Sure. I don't have any experience with the ITERS tool.
You're in the right places for beginners.
Yes, that's right. So very happy to be here to learn more about it. I'm glad you're here. So I've used the ITERS tool, but I've had no training.
It's very similar. If you're experienced with the ECHRs or the FECHRs or the FICRs, they kind of all you'll see a very similar aspect to them in terms of the structure and then kind of what we're looking for.
I haven't worked with it, but I recently have a manual.
Yes. Are you like going, what did I get myself into?
No, not yet. I've had some experience in using the others, so we have to be very monitors.
Yes. Well, welcome. Okay, so here we go. So I was just doing the people that are here, so I don't know if
Yeah, it looks like there's some people online. Some of the phone numbers and names are hidden. But it does look like we have Z Bang on the line, so welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for joining us today. And here we go. So our agenda today is kind of sharing why do we use ITERS? Why is it important to our programs? And then exploring a little bit of the activities. So it's going into depth of some of the activity centers and then some of the materials that we could add to those environments. And then also looking at and listening to the language that we use, because it's really important to have conversation and using language with our infants and toddlers. And then also an opportunity for you to be asked questions if there's something that you need a little more clarification on, or something, like I said, if I have to find the answer, I will go out and find it for you. Because that's the one thing that we learn very much about these tools, especially going into different environments, we see different things. A lot of this tool, we kind of create this box around it, but it's great when people kind of think outside of the box. So sometimes when we go into classrooms and I see things that I've never seen before, it really gets me thinking and it gets me excited, because it shows that people are excited about using this tool and they're kind of using it differently. So we see all kinds of great things. And there's times I come back and I'm like scratching my head because I've never seen something before and I have to think. And it's a great time where we can kind of all come together, my coworkers kind of talk about things. And then sometimes if I don't know the answer, I have my trainers that I go to and I ask my trainers those questions for you too. So the tool that I use to get all the information today is the Infant Toddler Environmental Rating Scale. And it's the little tiny book that we use that has the spiral bound to it. So the majority of stuff comes from this tool. We also have a big tool. It's called the All About book, and it's a big thicker book. And that gives you even more information about the ITERS tool. And I know for Quality Counts in North State, if you're participating with our program, we purchased a bunch of ours through Kaplan, and programs were able to use some of their allocation dollars to purchase these books. I know they're available through Kaplan, and they're also available on Amazon.com if that's something you were interested in purchasing. So what is ITERS? ITERS is a tool designed to assess center-based child care programs for infants and toddlers aged birth to 2.5 years of age. The scale consists of 39 different areas that we kind of focus on. It talks about everything from health and safety to the furniture that you have in your classroom, to your outside environment for the infants and toddlers to be able to use, to the materials. It also has a component for staff. So it kind of looks about how are staff involved in the program, what does their assessments look like. So it has a range of different things. Today, we're only going to focus on language, and we're going to focus on activities. So there's a lot more involved to this than what I'm going to talk to you about today. And then also it's available in Spanish. So why do we use the ITERS tool? We use the ITERS tool because it helps to create consistency throughout the classrooms, especially because it helps help you set up your environment. Like I said, it gives you examples of furniture to use. It gives you examples of materials. And as we're moving towards quality, those are things that we're really looking at. The tool consists of a rating scale from 1 to 7. 1 is inadequate, so things that we're just not seeing in the environment, kind of looking at furniture, is it children able to use it, is it safe? The 1 level, as we move up to a 5, those are good things, those are things that we strive to see. Anything in the 7 areas, those are remarkable, it takes work to get there, and everybody strives to be a 7, but 5s are fabulous. This tool helps staff identify how well they are meeting the children's needs. If we have materials in our environment that children love and children are learning from, those are the materials that we want them to use. And then it also helps us to kind of look at what are the materials that we have out in the environment that maybe children aren't interested in. How can I get them interested? Are they more advanced materials that maybe children aren't ready for, or are they materials that maybe they move past? So it kind of helps us with those. Are we meeting the children's needs? And then it helps to create a quality environment, which is the tool we're striving for, and especially with California participating in Quality Counts. That's one thing that we use. California requires us to use this tool as we're rating our environments. So quality programs must provide 3 basic needs for children: protection and of health and safety. So as we're using the ITERS tool, we're also paying attention to our hand washing procedures, our sanitation procedures. We're paying attention to the safety of our environments. Are we keeping things out that are hazardous to children's health? It looks at your outside environment. How are your play structures? How is your cushioning, your fall? Do children have enough cushioning when they fall if they're not going to get hurt? So it really goes into depth about that. Also building positive relationships amongst themselves and with the adults and therapists during the day. And it also looks for opportunities for stimulation and learning from experience. That's where we have the materials that we have on our environment and the interactions that we have with the children. So the first area that we're going to talk about is listening and talking, because this is so essential for children as they're learning. We get young infants in our care to toddlers. So really providing that language-rich environment for them. And how can we do that? What are conversations that we would want to hear throughout? So helping children understand language, things that we would want to see staff doing, or to talk to children throughout the day, and it is meaningful to the children. Having conversations, telling them with your words what you're doing. It's so important. Hearing talking happening throughout the day is something that we would want to hear in these environments. Verbal communication is personalized, using the name. Julia, and I figure that you're sitting in your chair. Come sit with me. Come sit with me, Chris. Let's do it. Let's look at a book together. Those types of things. So you're really bringing them into the language, because they're learning about themselves and they're learning to understand language. So we're providing that environment that's rich for them. Staff use simple, descriptive words for objects and actions in communication with children. You're washing your hands. You're sitting nicely in your chair. So you're kind of repeating to them what they're doing, saying, so that they're hearing, they're recognizing that what their actions are doing, and you're verbalizing them to them. Staff take part in verbal play with children. They're repeating their sounds. So you hear a lot of repetition. They say ball, you're repeating ball, you're looking for ball. So you're using a lot of that with them. And staff talk about many different topics with children. We're talking about feelings. We're talking about what they're doing. We're talking about what they're eating. We're again, like I've said, like 5 times, we're having that communication with them all the time. So that's helping children understand language. Because children that are sometimes in our environments, they may be with us for 8, 9 hours a day. And so really thinking about the environment that you're creating, thinking about the language that you're using with children, and making it the best that you can. Helping children use language. So we're helping them understand it, but now we're helping them use it. So staff generally respond in a timely and positive manner to children's attempts to communicate. For example, if a child's crying, we're quickly responding. We know that sometimes we have children that just cry and cry, but we're still kind of acknowledging them. That might just be the type of child that they are, or that might be the routine that they've gotten themselves in the morning. We understand that, but that you're still kind of acknowledging them. That verbal requests are attended to. So if somebody says, Miss Jackie's coming over and asking, how can I help you? Or what's the matter? Responding with interest to children's communication during the day. So those are things that we expect to see and hear happening. That staff are skillful at interpreting children's attempts to communicate and frequently follow through with example. But sometimes it's hard. We're getting to know children. We may not know everything, but if we know a young one's crying and it's about meal time, that might give us an indication that we're hungry. So I know that you're hungry. I'm making your bottle right now, or I know that you're getting tired. We're getting ready for nap time. So you're acknowledging those things for the child. And that staff have many turn-taking conversations. Even with a young infant, with the apple, that's still a conversation. Acknowledging that it's happening. And then staff add words and ideas to what children say. For example, when a child says blocks, the staff may respond with, here are some blocks. Or if you're at the meal table and the child says milk, would you like more milk? Would you like me to put more milk in your cup for you? So sometimes that's a skill in itself, understanding what they're trying to say. So sometimes it takes a couple times of understanding, or it's a different language that we're trying to learn. But it's that we're trying or attempting, whether it be you have a really skillful staff that's good at that. It's kind of relying on that staff to kind of help you through. And then asking simple questions. Do you like that? Do you like those toys? Oh, I can tell you're mad. You're mad. I can tell by your face. So it's kind of asking those simple questions. And that staff are balancing that balance between listening and talking, giving them the opportunity, because as we get older, they're starting to express themselves. So for giving them the opportunity and the time to be able to respond. So being conscious of that. So a lot during this age, these different ages, we do a lot of self-talk. And self-talk is when staff talk. When staff talk happens, when staff add words to the actions that they take and respond to children throughout the day. So I know a lot of times this is new and it's uncomfortable because it sounds kind of crazy. But staff talk is like if I'm coming over to the table and I'm going to pick something up, I'm verbally saying what I'm going to be doing. I'm going to walk over here and I'm going to pick up this book and I'm going to give it to you. So I come over and I give this book. So it's like I verbally said my actions out loud. So an example that I put is I'm getting the toys off the shelf for you to play with. So I vocalized what I was going to be doing, said my action out loud. It sounds kind of crazy and it's very uncomfortable at first because people walk in and they're like, what is she talking about? Why is she talking that way? And it feels uncomfortable. But for children that are learning language, it's helping them understand those actions. So we're going to practice self-talk. Or I've got some examples that if we feel uncomfortable. But here I have a picture of a teacher and it looks like they're getting ready for nap time and she's doing some rubbing. Would anybody like to kind of, if you were that teacher, what's some self-talk you could say out loud?
I'm rubbing Bobby's back. Do you see how it makes him feel calm when I'm rubbing his back very softly? I hold you and you're going to come right here. And then when I'm done rubbing Bobby, you can do it this way.
Very perfect. Perfect
But I like the
example.
tone of voice, like how you're talking very gentle. That's part of it too.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, I'm not rubbing his back.
Yeah. So it was very, very good. I'm calmly rubbing your back, and I'm holding you, and I'm going to put you in your cot, and we're going over here. So it's like telling what she was going to do. So at this age, we're also providing opportunities for children to be able to look at pictures and books. So we're offering a wide selection of books that are accessible for much of the day. Oops, my slide for much of the day. We'll come back to much of the day. But much of the day, you're going to hear this throughout. Much of the day is things that are accessible for children to be able to use. Accessible is another word for that children can just find it from themselves by themselves. You go to the shelves by themselves and be able to get it. If teachers have to pull them out of the shelves or up high on the shelf and pull them down, that is not considered accessible because a young toddler is not able to reach them. It's something that they can reach for and use anytime throughout the day. Yes. And there has to be at least 12 books available. Always has to be 12, with no less than 2 for each child. So basically 2 books per child. But if you have a group of 4, you still need 12 books.
So if you have different ages, like young infants and then you have toddlers, would you have to have like specific books for infants and toddlers?
No.
Oh, cool.
No, for this, it kind of covers everybody, all those age groups. So at least 12 books, but no less than 2 per child. So basically 2 per child. Staff read to children daily with individuals in small groups or those interested in book times, and those times must be warm and interactive. So we're looking for those small groups. Child wants a book to be read, the teacher's sitting with them reading the story. If a child gets up and wants to go do something else, that's fine, because you're following the child's lead. The book area is set up for children to use individually. So here, we're wanting to see a little shelf with some books or a basket with some books for children to be able to use. And that staff are involved in reading with children throughout the day. So there's not, for here, we're looking for multiple times where teachers are reading to individual children or to small groups of children. And that books are added and changed to maintain interest. So we're kind of looking for that rotation, that monthly rotation of books. And that books relate to current classroom activities and themes. So if we're having a bug theme, we have some books on bugs for that theme. See how this kind of stuff falls in line with the ITERS? Very similar, very similar. So also with books, we're looking for specific categories of books. We're looking for books of people with different races. We're looking for different ages. So anybody younger than them to anybody older. So if we have a toddler, an infant is younger, and somebody older could be a teenager, a parent, a grandparent. So we're looking for a variety of those books. We're looking for ability books. So people wearing glasses, books on sign language, books with individuals in wheelchairs. We're looking for books on animals, familiar routines, such as a bath routine or morning routine, and we're looking for books on familiar objects. And then I kind of put some examples. So the bath routine is a good example for a routine. And then here we have a how to babysit a grandpa. So we've got some ability there because he's wearing glasses. And then we also have an age. So there's a book that kind of gets double printed. And then we have Lola, which is a race. And then I love baby animals or animal book. And then down here is what do you see is familiar objects. So we're just kind of looking for a variety of those books and at least 2 per category. So here's an opportunity where I may show a picture and ask a question, and then you can kind of give some example of a question you might ask or example of a conversation you could have. So here it's asking, staff and the child are looking at a book together, and the child says, bear. What descriptive words can the staff say back to the child about the bear? So if we're looking for descriptive words because we know that's something children need, we're trying to big bear, brown bear, there we go. Brown bear, big bear. Those are providing descriptive words for the child. And look at how warm that is. Those are those types of things. So now we're going to talk a little bit about activity centers and materials. And this is just going to kind of go over the different areas and the different materials that you can have. It's going to give you a huge variety of things, which is great because a variety gives us opportunity to kind of to see what we have, what can we use right now, what can we save for later, because we know children's interests change. And we know sometimes when we're seeing different types of behavior, one indication could be thinking about the materials in our environment. What can we add and change to kind of get them more engaged with play? So different activity centers for the ITERS tool, but we're going to look at fine motor, physical activity, art, music and movement, blocks, dramatic play, sand and water, nature and science, use of TV, video, and or computers, and promoting acceptance of diversity. And when we're looking at these activity centers, I also put in an opportunity for us to think about language and conversation. So we're going to have an opportunity, if we feel comfortable, to kind of come up with some of those examples. Throughout these, you're going to hear the word much of the day used. And it's very similar to, it's the time in which materials are accessible for children to be able to play with. And I kind of briefly touched upon that earlier. Much of the day means that it can just go out and use it. If it's up high or put away, it is inaccessible.
But it doesn't have to relate to an hour or an hour and a half.
It doesn't have a specific amount of time. It just means that children have the opportunity to be able to use it as they choose to. When we get with younger children, infants, this is where much of the day can affect it. Because if a child's sitting or laying down and there's nothing for them to play with, nothing for them to touch, we start looking at how much of the day is being taken away. And if a child's sitting for 20 minutes, or we're calculating that child throughout our observation, if they're not able to use anything for 20 minutes, then this is where much of the day is going to affect those different areas. So if a child's sitting for 3 minutes with nothing to do, I'm starting to take note and saying, baby Jeannie over here has been sitting for 10 minutes and there's not a rattle for her to be able to use. She's kind of just sitting there by herself. And then maybe somebody comes over and gets her a book and is playing with her, and then they move her over here and she's by herself again. And I'm calculating that time, and that's 5 minutes. So that tells me 15 minutes she's had nothing to do. And then maybe they pick her up and they bring her over here and she's got a little something to play with, but then somebody comes and takes it away, and then she's here for another 10 minutes. So I'm calculating all those times, and that tells me for 25 minutes she's had nothing to do. So this is where much of the day comes into effect. So anytime a child has 20 minutes or more with nothing to do, they're not eating much of the day. That's why it gets tricky with infants, because we've got lots of infants that we're trying to take note of. And I know this gets tricky. Does anybody have questions while this is kind of fresh? It's okay. So fine motor, one of our categories is fine motor. Materials are accessible for much of the day. Oh, there we go, much of the day. We need 10 materials for a group of 5 infants, and then 1 additional material is needed for every infant after that. So if you have 10 infants, you would need 15 different types of fine motor materials. So if you have 6 infants, you just add 1 more material, so you would need 11. For toddlers, it's a little bit different. So 15 materials are needed for toddlers. For a group of 5 toddlers. And then 1 additional material is needed for every toddler after. So if you have 6 toddlers, it's more and more and more. And one time I went into a facility that I'm not joking, they had a big room and they had like 36 toddlers. So I'm like, oh my gosh, you need a lot of materials. You need a lot of just fine motor materials. They had like, I'm not joking, they had like 8 teachers. It was incredible. But they had it. This was in Fresno, and it was incredible to see. But it worked. But it was a lot. Very overwhelming where I come from. You know, I'm used to a small group of children. And like, oh my gosh, the children, there's a lot of adults in here. So we're also looking in
A
fine
lot
motor,
of cleanup.
a lot of cleanup, a lot of monitoring for things that are going in the mouths. And that's unfortunately where we get into trouble. But luckily, we're not talking about that today. We're looking at that materials are more organized, meaning there's a place for them. You know, that we know where they go. Doesn't have to be perfect because at this age, children are learning, so we're models for them. We're showing them how to clean up. We're probably doing the majority of the cleanup, but we're getting them to help us. That materials are rotated, so every month we're rotating things in and out, and that materials of different levels of difficulty are assessed. So we're kind of looking, we're looking to see that there's different things for them to be able to do for children that maybe are still learning, to children that maybe have kind of grasped that, or providing other things for them to do. So some examples of infant fine motor materials, we've got the stacking things for the infants, we've got rattles, which are very popular at this age. This little toy, which is really neat that they can move those little cups in and out, those are fun, and then the soft toys to be able to use. The little active stands of the things for them to be able to grasp. Those are very popular too. So what simple question could staff ask the child playing with the blocks? So remember, a simple question. Here we go. So a simple question to ask, are you playing with the blocks? Yes, you are.
Is that self-conversation?
It looks like he's having fun. So some toddler fine motor materials here. Skills are getting a little bit different. So we're looking for more advanced things than we maybe did with the infants. So things for them, like little shapes for them to fit those things. I love these little wall boards with the things that they can zip and lace through. And we've got a little toy down here. She's lacing something through. And these little Duplo blocks that are so popular with children. Those are just some examples of different things, but we're looking for just different hand-eye things for them to be able to use. And what's nice about this is there isn't specific categories of things. It's just anything that would fit that category works. So how can staff get the children interested in the materials if no one is using them?
Like last time, be on the floor, play with them.
On the floor.
Be interested in them yourself.
Yeah. One thing is like I used to do, like what Chris said, is I just go over and start playing with something. Before I knew it, I had one or two. What are you doing? What are you playing with? Got some interest. Maybe they didn't know that they were there. Maybe they forgot about them. So staff could play with the materials. Staff could show how to use the materials. Staff could rotate new materials into the environment. Sometimes we may love the toy. We may have had a group of children that loved the toys last year. This year, not so much. So that's an opportunity for us to look for new things for them to be able to play with, and a variety of different things for them to be able to investigate. So now we're looking at physical active play. Easy, accessible outdoor area for infants and toddlers to use at least 1 hour a week. So we're looking for at least 1 hour for them to have active play. It can be outdoors. Now we talk about weather, rain, and provide it inside. It's an opportunity for them to do that active play inside. So ample materials and equipment without long periods of time awaiting. If we know we have one trike that is so popular, so that kind of will tell us, do we need to invest in another couple bikes? And if we have so many children that are struggling, wanting turns, that kind of gives us an idea that maybe we need to get more. That all the space and equipment is appropriate for children. We talked a little bit about safety and protecting children. So we're kind of looking at our environment. Are our bikes, do they have sharp edges on them? Are they missing pedals? Do they have cracks in them? So we're kind of looking at our materials and determining, are they safe for our children to be using? An outdoor has 2 or more types of surfaces permitting different types of play with protection from some elements, because we're working with infants. So we're still giving exposure to the outside. So we want to be able to provide an environment where they're going to be able to be safe. So maybe if we put them on the grass, there's some shade there for them, and to be able to experience the outside, that's something very important. So kind of looking at those surfaces for them. Do they have grass? Do we have some cement or a pathway for trikes for the older toddlers? And that materials stimulate a variety of large motor skills, and we're wanting to see at least 7 to 3 examples. And some of those examples could include throwing, kicking, jumping, pushing, crawling, reaching, rolling, and sitting up. So thinking about those materials that we're putting in, or that equipment that we're putting in, and that we're getting some kind of skill from them. So with trikes, we're getting steering and paddling. With balls, we're getting throwing and kicking. All kinds of different. So we're looking at those equipment things, and then what kind of large motor skills are we getting from those? And then some physical active play for infants and toddlers. So these are just some different examples. So here we have an infant, and he's reaching for a ball. I was talking about the little jungle gym for the infant. That's considered an active play. For the toddler, we have a ball for her to play with, and then for the toddlers over here, those tunnels. So those are just a few of many examples of things that we can provide for children. So for an infant, what descriptive words would the staff use?
Something about the emotion.
You are so good. Staff could say, you're so happy, you are smiling, you're going down the slide. So there's some talking happening while they're playing outside. For toddlers, what descriptive words could staff use? Again, look at your big smile, you must like the slide, you're going down the long slide.
You said you're going to go so fast.
She said, you're going to go so fast. Yeah. So now we're going to talk a little bit about art, because for toddlers, art is an appropriate activity. If we have infants and we go in and we see artwork with infants, we ask those questions. Art is not necessarily something that has to be made available for infants because of their age, because it's teachers are there helping them with it. It's not something we wouldn't want crayons out with infants. If we give them exposure to things to those, we still have to kind of ask those questions about art.
So we would see more sensual experiences.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's exactly what it is.
But
Exactly. That's exactly what it is. It's giving infants the exposure, the sensory aspect of it. So again, materials are accessible for much of the day. For young toddlers, 12 to 23 months, we want to see art offered at least 3 times a week. With young toddlers, we're giving them exposure to that. So that doesn't necessarily mean that we have to have pencils and crayons out for them, but that we're offering it to them. So that's something, as an assessor, that's something I'm asking. So tell me a little bit about art with your 13-month-old. Or I'm looking on the lesson plan. Maybe they have art Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, and I'm looking to see what they're offering them. I'm looking at the art on the walls. Okay, over here I'm noticing they use watercolors, and I'm noticing that they use crayons. And then over here, they made collages with tissue paper. And then I'm looking at the date to make sure that it's at least 30 days or less that they've been made. And then from that, that'll give me some indication that they do have exposure to art. For the older toddlers, it's a little bit different. Older toddlers need exposure. Older toddlers, which are 24 to 30 months, they need to have it offered daily. This is where you want to see some materials out in their environment. It could be paper, some crayons, maybe some playground. Individual expression is encouraged. That children can do what they want to do with the materials that are provided to them. If we're making flowers, that the flowers, they can put the petals wherever they want on their paper. That everything isn't looking the same. If I walk into a classroom and they're making frogs and every frog looks the same, and their eyes are where their eyes are supposed to be, and their tongues are coming out of their mouth, that kind of tells me at this age, they had somebody helping them. But if somebody that probably did it for them. So I'm kind of looking at that, because that tells me that individual expression maybe wasn't the priority that day. And that a variety of materials are introduced to children as they're ready. When they get older, we know that Play-Doh is something that they enjoy. So that we're providing that with maybe, as we're introducing it, it's more teacher there with them at all times to make sure they're okay with it. But that it's being introduced. Different types of paints are being introduced to them. So some materials for younger toddlers. So for 2 to 23 months, these are some examples of things that we can have for them to be able to use in the Remember, 3 times a week. Large crayons, large paper taped to the surface so that they are able to do what they want on their paper, chalk and chalkboards, finger paints. These are just some examples. What's so nice about this tool is you can think outside of the box, because there's many, many more examples of things that you can use with them. So materials for older toddlers. So these are 24 to 30 months. Paper of different sizes, tempera paint, watercolors, Play-Doh tools, brushes of different sizes, large self-sticks, large stamps, stickers, and tape, cut out pictures for collages with glue. So remember, we want to see something in the environment, but we're wanting them to also have exposure with things. Some of these things like paint, we might not want them to be able to just be able to go out and use. But if we're sitting at the table doing an activity with them, that's appropriate. So we also talk about at this age, we're looking for toxic materials, materials that could be considered harmful to infant or to toddlers. And especially if we're doing art with infants, these are things to definitely eliminate from your materials. Any kind of glitter, oil paints, shaving cream, beads, if they have access to permanent markers, anything that's toxic. I know with shaving cream's a tough one because we love shaving cream, but the one thing I always tell people is if you question it, read the bottle, read the container. If it says keep out of the reach of children under the age of, then that tells you it is not an appropriate material for a child to use. Beads, huge choking hazard. Same thing with googly eyes. Cotton. We also have the big All About book, which goes into more detail about choking hazards and materials that are toxic and unsafe for toddlers. But these are just some of the examples because we all love glitter. I know I love shaving cream. It's tough to get rid of, but Unfortunately,
Can you use shaving cream for the preschools? Or is it toxic?
you have to read the container, and probably like 99% of the time, it's going to say keep out of the reach of children under the age of, and that's why it's considered an unsafe material.
Is there a good substitute for shave cream that people use? Like for that same kind of sensory experience?
I know at one point Lakeshore was making something.
Lakeshore was, and I haven't seen it in a long time, but it was colored shaving cream.
I found that not Lakeshore, it was, what's the other one? Kaplan? The other one, the cheaper one. This gun had it, but it stayed your hands.
Oh.
It stayed, but it was non-toxic, but it stayed bad.
Oh,
And then all the days you would whip up Ivory Flakes.
Do you have it?
Hang out once in the stuff on her because it was parents were.
It stayed horribly, yes. Yes.
Anything that they can eat, like people that say whipping cream, they eat it. So that wouldn't be okay.
Unless you wanted it.
Or if it was sanitary.
Anything that they could eat, no.
So yeah, no finger cutting with pudding and yogurt.
No. I know I spoil all the fun.
And mud.
So some examples of art. Pumpkins, Play-Doh, oh, look at those ones down there. They are having a blast.
That looks like that brick ain't gonna be no more.
Yes. It's fun. Just fun stuff. Just think of all the different things that you do. Just as long as we're being safe and considerate of the materials that we use, there's hundreds of examples. So what questions could staff ask to start a turn-taking conversation? Some examples are, what are you making? Tell me about your picture. So music and movement, another category that we're going to move into, is a fun one because we love music. We love music at this age. It's fun. It's exciting. We want to at least offer 10 musical toys and or instruments that are accessible for much of the day. Doesn't matter how many children you have, just need 10. And it could be adults. It could be the musical toys that they use, something that's playing music. So a lot of times for your fine motor things, it's playing a song, that's music. So we got fine motor and we have music. Informal singing and chanting or other musical experiences that are happening with children throughout the day. So listening for the songs, looking at the lesson plan to see, maybe if I didn't hear it, when do we have music time? Recorded music is used with a meaningful purpose. And what that means is, unfortunately, if we turn music on just to kind of have background noise, that's going to affect this area. Music for meaningful purpose means we're going to turn music on if we're going to dance. When the interest is gone, we'll turn it off. Music for nap time, that is appropriate because we're trying to get children to rest their bodies and calm their minds, so that is appropriate. But unfortunately, during our activity time, we're wanting it just to have you. And if it's not being used, or if it's over 20 minutes when it's not being used, that's where it's going to affect this area. And that we're offering a variety of music, such as classical, children's songs, and music of different cultures. So here we're also looking for that variety. So here we're moving into blocks, and blocks are fun. So we need at least 3 sets of blocks of different types, accessible daily for much of the day, 10 or more of each set of blocks.
So the pre-K was 2 sets, and here it's 2.
In order to get into the 7 area, we need at least 3. It's a little bit different. And then we need a variety of accessories. So we need at least 5 people, at least 5 animals, and at least 5 transportation tools. and that blocks and accessories are sorted by type. So if you have a block shelf, that we have maybe our wooden blocks here, our foam blocks here, and our soft material blocks here. And down here we have our shelf for our people, and we have a container with animals, and then we have a shelf for our cars that we're using this month.
And so if you have an infant one and you have a toddler one, this would be the requirements for both.
This would be the requirement, actually this is the requirement just for, that's a good question, I think I forgot to put it down. Just toddlers. Infants are not needing blocks. This would be for infants and toddlers, I apologize. It is for infants and toddlers. That was a good question. You spoke me that. Thanks for that. So I have a variety of blocks. So we have our wooden unit blocks. Here we have some soft blocks. And then here we have some plastic blocks. If we have 10 of each, we've covered the requirements. And then we just need a variety of accessories. So we need 5 of each type. So we need 5 people. And then if we look at our people, we see the little girl with glasses. Take note of her because she's going to also follow us over to promoting acceptance and diversity for abilities. So this is, we're going to see different areas picking up different categories throughout. So we have cars, 5 cars, and we have a couple. We have animals, and we have more than 5, and that is okay. So we got some favorites down there that we'd like to share. So at least 5. And then what simple question could staff ask about this child building blocks? So the staff could ask, where is that yellow block going? Oh, it's going on the left. So for this age, we're always talking, always describing things. Dramatic play. Dramatic play is for infants and toddlers. So we have many and varied age-appropriate dramatic play materials accessible daily. So here, we just want to have them available. We're missing that much of the day component that we've been talking about. So here's, just have them available. Props represent what children experience in everyday life. So we have housekeeping things, baby things for them to use. Materials are organized by type. So we maybe have food and some dishes and some clothing and some baby things that we use over here. And that child-sized play furniture is available for toddlers. We have a little table for them to sit at with some chairs. And the props provided represent diversity. So maybe we're looking at our food. Do we maybe have some sushi or some burritos or some pizza in the food? Or do we have dishes? We're looking at some of the clothing. And the props provided for toddlers are also available outside. So we're having an outside dramatic play area. So we're offering some of those things outside. And that is as we're moving towards 7, we're moving towards that excellent. Remember, it takes a little bit more to get there. So outside, we'll maybe we have a little sink and a little table and some dishes of food for them to play outside with.
So early Head Start is putting in a mud kitchen.
Yes, so nice. Those are beautiful. Fun. That's dramatic play outside. And that staff pretend with children. So that's a key component. Staff have to be involved in dramatic play. Cooking with them, having them make a meal for them, having them dressed, meeting with them. That's key at this. So some dramatic play materials for infants, because there are specific categories for each age group. So for infants, there must be at least 2 dolls, 2 stuffed animals, 2 toy phones, and pots and pans. So if we have infants, we're looking for those things for them to be able to play with. Remember, that's 12 or under. 12 months or under. For toddlers' dramatic play, we added a bunch of things to our list. We're looking for dolls, at least 2 dolls, at least 2 stuffed animals, 2 phones, pots and pans, some dress-up clothes, some child-sized play furniture, some play foods, some dishes and eating utensils, some doll furniture, and some small buildings and accessories. Doll furniture is like maybe a high chair for the baby. And then small play buildings and accessories is like the little farmhouse with the farm animals.
So it's a roller too.
Oh, yes. So there's quite a bit more from, 12 months to 24, 30 months. Many more different materials that need to be accessible to them. So props representing diversity. So also when we're looking at dramatic play, we're looking for that diversity piece. And we want to at least have dolls representing 3 different races. Very specific at this point. And that we want to have at least 2 other materials showing diversity. So that could include your play food. And it could also include if you have a little house in there with people. Or it could be clothing. It could be dishes. Lots of stuff to remember. And that, remember, for older toddlers, we're wanting that piece outside. We're wanting some outside dramatic play happening. So these are just some examples. There's a baby with her high chair out there, and she's feeding her. Over here we have kind of like a little plant shop, and over here is like a little gardening area that they're playing in. So just providing those experiences outside for them too. So sand and water, a very important piece for sand and water. It does not have to be offered for children under 18 months. So this is only for children 18 months or older. And that sand and water must be offered at least once a week or daily for children 18 months or older. There must be close supervision when using water and sand. And why do you think that is? Children. Very oral. Water, there's always the risk of somebody drowning. Better that much. So those have to be closely supervised. That means that somebody has to be right there at all times. Unfortunately, that's what that means. That we have a variety of toys that offer 3 to 4 skills. So at this age, we're looking for pouring, dumping, scooping, piling. And that sand and water activities are set up for enough space just for them to be able to move around. A little water table, that's sufficient. And activities are done, different activities are done with sand and water, and that's something that we ask. So do you do other things with sand and water? What do you do? So those are something that we ask. Maybe you do different things in the spring than you do in the winter. So that's an opportunity to kind of share those different things. So nature and science, which is a fun one because we're investigating, we're learning. Daily experiences with nature are done at least twice a week. So there's something happening at least twice a week. And you see a lot of this. You see a lot of this happening also when we look at the video.
It's kind of spontaneous. I mean, it can, you know, following long enough.
Exactly. And that could be it.
For us, it was, kids were outside and all of a sudden there's this big, huge jackrabbit just jumping right past the fence. We were bouncing in the tall grass. And going in there and looking to see if we could see their ears. And we would jump back up and chasing them because of us. So then after that, they would do imitate jumping.
We were jackrabbits.
That is exciting. You know, one year my mom, she was a toddler teacher and she did the butterfly thing in her classroom and they watched them hatch and they put them out in their garden. And that every time a butterfly would come by, like next week or a week later, they'd always remember, like, oh, there's no butterflies, there's no butterflies. So that reminded me. There's daily experience with living plants or animals indoors. That means that we have something inside that's living. It could be a plant, it could be an animal, and that we're bringing some attention to. So we're talking about it. Oh, let's go look at Nemo or fish. Nemo. And that staff show interest and respect for nature. Or just, you know, we value it. We talk about it when we're outside. The sun on our face. The raindrops that are falling on our picture. Nature and science materials are well organized and in good repair. At this age, like I said, we're learning how to put things away, but there's an order to it. It doesn't have to be perfect, but that we can go in and say, oh, this must be our science area. And then just some fun things. Some examples of the little girl looking at a pine cone, or the little boy looking at the fish, and the little boy outside and investigating on the ground. So what is a simple question staff could ask? A simple question could be, what do you see? What are you looking at? Are you looking at flowers? Oh, you're looking at flowers.
I was picking up the one.
Are you picking up the white flowers? Ooh,
Can you say that one again louder? I couldn't hear you.
Oh, I said, looks like you're picking flowers. That would make a bouquet.
Vocabulary.
Yeah, I like that. No, that's not bouquet.
So many things. So at this age too, we're also taking note of the different types of technology that we're using with infants and toddlers because sometimes we use them. Any screen time, we have to take note of it. Screen time means if you're using an iPad for songs at group time, and let's say their favorite song is Bingo, and there's a dog on the screen that's moving, any type of movement on the screen, that is screen time, so we do have to kind of look at how much time we're spending, and is it quality, and are there other things for children at this age to be able to do. So all material that's used has to be non-violent and culturally sensitive, and that if screen time is being used for this age, there's something else for the children to be able to do, because if they don't want to look at it, they're not forced to look at it. And that time is limited, so we're only using a small amount of our time to be able to do this. And most activities encourage active involvement with staff. So staff's there participating with them. And that some of the computer software encourages creativity and materials support and extend classroom themes. A lot of these times in your rating scale, there's questions you can ask. Because a lot of times when we go into classrooms, we don't always see them using their iPads, but those are questions we have to ask. And when we ask those questions, we learn a little bit more about our program. We learn a little bit more about the classroom. So it kind of gets the teachers and the staff thinking, how much time do we actually spend using TV and using movies every day? And if we do this, how is it going to affect this tool? And if we know this tool gives us a rating, we want to make sure we get the highest rating. So it may be that maybe instead of allowing children to watch TV an hour a day, we're kind of minimizing it to maybe a half hour. So promoting acceptance of diversity. So we're looking at this piece also. So we're offering many books, pictures, and materials showing diversity of people of different races, cultures, ages, abilities, and gender. So we're offering dolls that represents 3 different races. And remember, we were looking at this in our dramatic play area. We're offering pictures or books that are accessible to children of men, women, boys and girls in similar work or play roles. And we're looking at cultural awareness and a variety of activities. So there's many different ways that we can show this component. So promoting diversity in our classroom, a big component is books. That's one of our categories in books. That's one of the areas that we look at. So we're looking at the books that we're putting out, and do they meet this component? We're looking at the materials that we put out in our environment, like our people. Do they show race, abilities, culture, gender? Pictures that we put up. We've got some abilities that we're showing. We're showing race. We're showing a little bit of culture. Same thing with our babies. We're showing different race. And again, with our food, culture. Oh! We're way early, huh? I can't believe it. Okay.
I did ask this many questions.
So we have got question time. We are way early. It's okay. It's okay. Does anybody have any questions or anything?
Questions. I haven't worked with the infants and toddlers. This is good information for me because I've worked a lot with preschool and then kindergarten and first grade for many years. So, when I work at the parenting classes at night, I bring activities and I get stuck sometimes on the infant and toddler ones. And sometimes I brought stuff and I'm like, oh, you know what? This is a little bit too advanced for them. So this is.
Yeah, it is. And you know, I'm very similar. I came from the preschool background. So I was a preschool teacher for 15 years before I became a mental coach with Florida Defense. So coming into my role, I really had to learn about infants and toddlers because that was very unfamiliar ground. So I still am learning, very similar to you, or I have to really think about it when I'm working with a provider that has toddlers. Because maybe sometimes the activities that I'm suggesting are not appropriate because it's not their age. So definitely, it's definitely an eye opener for me too.
On the slide before, when we talked about the books, that it wasn't a specific number of books.
It's at least 2. So we're wanting at least two of those books. So with books, with our book category, it's at least 2. So I'll go back. Very beginning.
Oh, it's right back. That's when we're in that period.
We whisked through this. Yeah, the categories of books. So races, ages, which is like we were talking about the grandpa, and then abilities, animals, familiar routines, and familiar objects. So these 2.
So when it says the animals, it means being more realistic pictures
For animals,
for the animals.
um,
I'm not sure.
a mixture of both.
sides.
So it's a
First-
for animals are
Right, right.
for
For this age, yes. It's a little bit different. Okay, does anybody else have any questions?
Is there any important things, Leslie, that you think like providers should know about the ITERS tool? Or, I mean, you covered a lot in your presentation, but if they're coming out, somebody's doing an assessment, you know, is there anything major sticking points you can think of or areas to focus on?
Yeah, I think the one thing you always want to focus on is much of the day. That's really important, especially if you are working with your infants. You really, really have to be aware of that. Because as you go through this tool, we saw how many of these categories where we do focus on much of the day. So if you have one child throughout the observation that hasn't had access to specific particular things, remember I'm taking note throughout my observation, and 20 minutes can add up very quickly to a child that's quiet over here, that isn't making a lot of noise, that maybe somebody really isn't recognizing.
So it's not that they've been awful much of the day, it's that everybody's been actually.
No, it's that it's like the quiet child that isn't crying, saying, I need something to play with, that child not necessarily isn't being taken care of, but that child isn't having any opportunity to hold anything, grasp anything, play with anything, interact with anything. Yes.
Some don't facilitate all these steps.
That exactly, perfect, yes. So I'm always taking note of that, in calculating 3 minutes that child's been there. I'm starting to take note of it. I'm starting to take track. So after 20 minutes, much of the day hasn't been met. So it's going to affect all of those different areas where much of the day is. So you won't get anything more than a 4 in those areas, and that can be critical throughout this tool.
That could be just one child that was at 20 minutes, even if all the other ones.
Exactly. It can be one child that can affect the whole thing.
In my experience too, I'm not knowing who are coming in for ITERS, specific areas, I want to make sure every area is being utilized at a certain time. But I found there's sometimes where the children do not have the interest to that they're in other areas, so we will get more time because they don't see us interacting with walk with the children. But this is like technology, whatever. Yesterday, everybody was walking because that's what
Right.
we're always kind of trained to talk to, go leave
As they
the
go.
child. So we go, it's not that they don't have it, it is accessible, it is available. It's at that point, they were not interested, they were focusing on another, something about.
Yeah. So like, that's a good question, because it kind of makes me think too, it's like if you know you're having an assessor there and you know part of your rating will depend on dramatic play. If nobody's in dramatic play or nobody's going to blocks, the importance of that, what's one thing that we can do to kind of bring children to those areas to kind of help with those scores?
Would it be more effective if they just more than just that a certain hour of time block for 2 days at a different time?
Could be.
I just feel it would be a little more effective. It's well, they have to program, but they come out. The first part we're having lunch,
Yeah.
and we only have they're just so limited. We're doing our free play, and we come back for those open, the others are finishing brush your teeth, and then we're going to quick time outside.
Yeah.
We come back in, we'll snack, and we open up the block area, and we have sensory to those moments, and then we'll be there for the 2 hours instead of trying to do it for 6 hours.
I was thinking if there was a question we could ask. Unfortunately, it looks like we have to see it.
Usually our group is good.
Yeah. That might be something too, like, we had kind of talked about if there isn't any interest in it, how can a teacher or staff bring interest to it? Maybe just go over there and sit and play. You know, just go over and sit in the dramatic play area and start cooking. Yeah, yeah.
Or bring a bunch of blocks to the cooking areas.
Exactly. Perfect. you. Oh, yes. Another thing, thank you, Julia, she reminded me. We go through the Environmental Rating Scale Institute. It's ERSI.com. And they actually provide updates for us for our rating scale. So when I need to log in to kind of see if there's been any changes, I log in there and they provide me with notes that maybe there's been specific changes. And I'm kind of showing the people that are here, I'm holding out my rating scale, and then you'll see I have notes down here. These are changes that they've made to the original rating scale. So sometimes something may have changed the way that we look at things. Maybe a big piece is hand washing policy has changed. And that's something that we have to take note of that and make sure that we make those appropriate changes to our tool. I check regularly, and so do all assessors. And as people that are using this tool, you should be looking at this too, because they will randomly make those changes and nobody really knows about it until we check it and update it. And then we can provide that information to everybody that we work with in our
Yeah, because one of the things we found that in where they were looking at our picture to make sure that it's supposed to be colors of crayons, natural colors came down.
Yeah. And that's a great way to cover. Yeah, that's a great way to cover in diversity too, because there's so many different places you can add things to these, and adding those different colored crayons. That's a fabulous way to do that. Thank you for reminding me of that.
I just asked you that the other day.
Yeah. Online people have any questions for you, Leslie? I think we just have one. I'm not. Hi. That was interesting. So I think I just muted. Okay. I muted, so I'm not gonna unmute it. So I think that's it. Leslie, do you have anything else?
I think I didn't go into a big component about, we really wanted to focus on language, which is huge at this age, and then also give you some examples of activity centers and materials. And I think with infants and toddlers, it's pretty much out there in terms of, it's pretty simple when you look at the materials that they need and the categories that they need. When we do the older children, the preschoolers, I think we get more categories and more things that we need. So I apologize that this one went so quickly. I was expecting it to be a little bit longer, but it went a little bit quicker because I think there just isn't as much material in it as the other one.
But like going back to what you were saying before, the age groups, like for ours, we have starting off young 2-year-olds, and then eventually they become 3s. So when we first began the year, we started out with just the memo that was required for much of the day.
Mm-hmm.
So just a few materials out there to get them to understand how to routines place the activity back when they're finished before going to the program. And as they get a little older and go through 3s, then we're actually doing much of the materials for art. Before we were just doing crayons and markers and chalk. Now you have stamp pads, you have hole punchers, and we have the gluing large materials, and then the glue balls, glue sticks, for twisting and squeezing, and we have the Play-Doh scissors, and then the realistic scissors we bring out when that's the teacher corrected for safety and teaching them how to safely pass and to make decisions for themselves.
Nice.
So now they're getting ready for preschool, so we're transitioning more directed activities towards them.
And where do you work?
I work through the Head Start program. I'm the primary caregiver for the toddlers to 3s at Oakview.
Nice. Well, thank you so much for coming. you walked away learning something.
Yeah, a little more details, changes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, they haven't updated them in a couple of years, but like I said, it just randomly happens, and it's like a word of mouth. Oh, did you notice that there was a new update? And that's
Yeah,
how we
because
learn
we
about
had
it.
an extensive one when we were training others to.
Yes.
They will measure the shelving if it's going to be a bonus. We share ours with an older, younger threes, half day customer, and we had multiple different sizes, but eventually we had to get ones that were shaved down a little bit.
Yeah.
To accommodate, so we
Right.
could still pass.
Because there's so much more that goes into this too than I did, because like I said, we talk about the safety of things, so we're looking at height of things. Is it safe for children? We just didn't go into it today because it is more, it's pretty intense when we look at all the requirements.
Tell me about the enforcement. What is the change?
So I'm gonna go ahead and end the meeting online, and then we can kind of continue with some conversation. But thank you for those who called in. I'm gonna end the meeting now. Thank you.